We've got about 70 in. We have about 90 registered for the class, so I'm going to give it another couple minutes for everybody to drift in. I know a lot of you guys. I looked at a lot of the names, and we've got a lot of veteran teachers. We've got a lot of newer teachers under 4 or 5 years, and then I know we do have a lot of brand new year or less teachers in this session as well. So let me give a few more minutes for everybody to come in, then I'll introduce myself. Okay, I'll go ahead and get started. So if we haven't met, my name is Kesha House. I teach in the health science cluster at Heritage High School in Blount County, Tennessee. I have been teaching a total, I want to say 11 years, 7 or 8 in secondary, and then I taught 3.5 years in the college arena in radiology sciences. So that's my background. I'm a registered radiology technologist. So diagnostics for me, the radiology portion just comes very naturally. You'll see there all my credentials. I have a bunch of different degrees, and I actually have 10 years in the Air Force, and I do have experience teaching college courses, hybrid, virtual, and on ground. So that's why when I was speaking to Sloan, I thought it would be good for me to share some of my practices that I use when doing virtual classes. So we'll discuss that as well as the station work that was mentioned in the description. All right, see if my slides.
Kesha, if I could say real quick, some folks are having trouble locating the polls. I just want them to make sure they know that at the top of their chat box, they'll see several tiles up there. They can select chat, people, polls, or files. So that's where they will find those polls.
Thank you, David. All right, so this is Innovations for Diagnostic Medicine, and I am going to be speaking specifically about a new assignment I created and kind of going through that and how I built that and the results of that, as well as how we would move that to a virtual classroom, because all of us are facing that right now. All right, so this will be the agenda for the course today. I'm going to continue with introduction. Then we're going to talk specifically about the station work for ophthalmology that I did, and I've shared all of that with you guys under that same area where polls and chat is also an area to download files for this session. If you've not done so, I've given you everything you need to just steal this straight from me, because I share all my stuff. About 1/3 of you on this right now already have access to my Google Drive, so you know I give everything I have away. And if you haven't tapped me for that, feel free to shoot me an email this afternoon and I'll send you guys the links for that, that info. Then we're going to move on to how to move station work online. It is doable. And then we're going to talk generally about virtual learning for diagnostic medicine, some do's and don'ts I've learned over the years, and then we'll have a question and answer, which David is going to help us field that. All right, so we're going to look first at the diagnostic medicine standards, and you'll see here the themes I have are not the themes that are specifically listed in the standards. These are Kesha's version of the themes. So I kind of group all of my safety together. I put my HIPAA under safety, my infection control, and of course all that safety we visit every year. The fire safety, body mechanics, all of that kind of stuff is wrapped into safety for me. These students have had all of that before in 1 or 2 classes prior to taking this class. For me, because we do require the intro class before taking diagnostics, so it's a little bit refresher and a little bit more in depth, especially as far as the HIPAA goes, because that standard is more in depth. So we have safety, and I wrap that all in. When it comes to those 3 standards that are about laboratory safety and radiology safety specifically, I do those when I do those big sections. So I don't teach those separately in a safety, the way it's divided out in these standards. So you'll see there, these are my standards. I do safety, ophthalmology, a big lab section, radiology, cardiovascular, and then kind of that robotics standard and a couple of the other little standards I pump into a professionalism. We also go over their portfolios. So that's how I divide my themes for my classes. And specifically for this session, we're gonna look at that ophthalmology standard. So those ophthalmology standards are standards 21, 22, 23, and 24. I did provide you those and they're easy to look up. If you guys teach this class, I'm sure you have the standards, but those are the main ophthalmology standards. And breaking them down real easy, one of them talks about anatomy, another is about diseases, disorders. We're gonna do a vitals recap and sign off. Now I've done vitals and intro, so this should be a refresher. But we know we have students who maybe haven't taken that class in a couple of years. So we are gonna have to kind of revisit that, re-sign these guys off, make sure they can do those vitals. We're gonna teach visual acuity exams, the actual examinations that they're gonna do, and then talk about careers. Now careers isn't actually listed in those 4 standards, but I added in because they kind of need it for their portfolio. And I figure if we're gonna talk about ophthalmology, we should be talking about the career options in that area as well. So that's Kesha's added that in. So now we're gonna actually look at the station work that I did. And you'll see here that for this class, one of the reasons that I wanted to look at doing this station work is if you just read through the standards for this class, there aren't a lot of skills built in. It's very cognitive, very heavy, a lot of writing. And if I am a student and I'm thinking I can go to class and work on some engines, or I can go to class and write some papers, even if you want to be in healthcare, a lot of students don't want to have to sign up for that class where they know they're going to be doing less hands-on. So I really, in the last couple of years, have really worked hard to get more and more hands-on in this class. And one of the ways is this station work. I was able to build that in, but also I wanted more engagement strategies with my students, more ways to get them thinking on their own, but enjoying that thinking. And then I wanted to be able to work more one-on-one with students. I felt a lot of this class for me was a lot more of me up front, me on stage, and less of them on stage, unless they were writing. And so I wanted to break away from that. So I wanted these small groups to be able to build those relationships, give them that feedback they need to really get better. If you're not on the Facebook, the Tennessee Health Science Teachers Facebook page, I highly recommend you join that. That is where I read about other teachers doing station work in other classes. And it seemed to really, they were bouncing ideas off each other. And I thought, wow, I bet this would work for diagnostics. So I really buckled down and thought, how can I make this work in this class to add more of that fun to the class? This is a lot of writing. You can kind of read through these. I'm not going to read them all to you, but I just wrote out what my thoughts were. I was thinking about first my classroom environment. What can I do physically in the class? I'm lucky enough to have a larger classroom. I have tables, I have desks. So how can I organize that to do group work, to do these small sessions, these daily stations where we rotate what we're doing? Do I want them to rotate? Do I want the materials to rotate? And I don't just teach diagnostics like most of you guys. I can't just leave it set up for the day. So how do I easily have the materials there, but when I have other classes, not have the materials there? So for me, I decided on 6 tables worked best, 6 groups. So I wanted to have 6 stations. And then I have a lot of ophthalmology material. And even though it's not my background, I got really good at it. I'm very comfortable with the ophthalmology section. So I thought, I have lots of extra material to choose from. I have lots of assignments. This is the section I feel comfortable trying this with. So I decided to do ophthalmology. And then I wanted a good mix of different things. You have students who learn hands-on. You have students who need that individual time, not so much group work. You have students who do best with visual or creative. So I wanted a mix of things at my stations, not just the same thing with a different topic. And then I got to thinking, because some of my assignments really would take 2 days. But when I started thinking, how would I rotate if one of the stations took 2 days, it really got complicated. So then I decided 1 day per station. And if my materials didn't fit that, I modified my materials, or I just didn't use them. I found something else or built something else. And then the main thing was, if I'm going to spend this much time, because that's at least 6 days on this, I wanted to cover as many standards as possible. I don't just want to spend all that time and only be checking off one standard at the end of it. So I looked at all those things when I started thinking about this. When I planned, you also have to plan for, what if a student is absent? So I know that if I did station 2 with my group and they move to station 3 tomorrow and I'm not there, how do I make that up when I come back and my group is on station 4 the next day? So I had to think about, how will those students make up that work? So I added a 7th day for a makeup day. Not only could those students make it up, but the group as a whole, I decided, could, if they didn't quite finish something, like a lot of them didn't quite finish their posters that I had them do, that they wanted to make them look better. That 7th day was their day to do that. Anybody who was absent could do what they needed to make up that work. But I also had to think, they're not working with their group now, so how does that student who was absent, what is their alternate assignment, or how are they going to do that assignment if they're not working with their group? So I had to pre-plan all of those things. And then on day 7, what if a group, all the members had been there and they were already done with everything? Well, I decided if they hadn't made what in my class is a 4, because I do standards-based grading, or an A on their assignment, that they had to improve an assignment. That if they didn't make 100, they had to prove, even if they did well on all their assignments, the one they did the least well on, they had to improve it. That way, everybody was doing something and growing and learning on that 7th day. So that's how I handled those things. And then a few more things I had to do. Highly recommend, make a rubric and detailed directions for every single station. And then plan what I'm teaching prior to that. I can't just hand my kids some Play-Doh and say, make eyeballs. I had to kind of teach them some of the anatomy beforehand. I didn't just hand them the stuff for visual acuity and say, go ahead and go take an eye exam on this person. So instead, I had lectured some of this stuff beforehand. We had done a gradual release, and I do, we do, you do, of visual acuity. But now was their time. We had done that already in a class, and now there was their time to show they can master it, do it over and over again, and chart it for me so that I can see they actually have it down. So I had touched on all the topics that we're doing in the stations prior to actually starting station work. And then you'll see where I've written most important. So for me, the most important aspect of this was I had a peer student who was my peer counselor, but a student I'd had for many years. So I trusted him, had a good relationship, and he reviewed all these materials with me. And he would say, Miss House, I don't understand what you want them to do. Let's reword this. Or, oh no, Miss House, they're going to cheat. They're going to copy. They're going to do this. So, and those kind of things really help me narrow down and give really concrete, detailed directions. So that was him working with me. Was really important. Not just another teacher, but a student who had been in that class was able to say, oh yeah, I wish we had done this, or how about this, or this is a little repetitive. I don't think they'll really care for this. All of those feedbacks made the biggest difference for this. So you'll see there, it says what station sounds the most interesting to you for your students. And I think I actually went through and skipped another poll I had. So there was a second poll asking if you had done this kind of station work before. If you haven't already, if you'll go ahead and answer that poll question. And then for this question, if you've reviewed the material already and you've looked through what I've given you, then feel free to answer that now, or as I'm going through these different stations that I did, just answer that question for me. I just kind of want to see how everybody else would run their class, or what might interest your classroom. So I'm going to go ahead and move into talking about the 6 different stations. But if you want to take a moment and take those polls or review that material that I've given you on the stations for ophthalmology. And David, do we have any questions coming up or anything that I need to address before I move forward?
Nope, all's looking good.
Okay, if you guys do have questions, there is a place to put questions, not only in the chat, but there's also a poll area to put questions. I can answer now or later. All right, so station 1 here, and these are all pictures of my students. This is that vital station. And like I said, some students, They have had every health science class we have. They've never had a break in it, and they can take vitals better than I can. And then you've got some students who they're a senior and they haven't had a health science class since they were a freshman. So yeah, they learned it, but it's been a while. Well, this gives me the ability on this day. So if today I've only got 4 students working on this, then I actually can sit down and work more one-on-one with that student who needs extra help taking vitals. That's something that's hard to do if I have all 25 students taking vitals on the same day. And I know for all of us who've taught vitals in the class, if you're not new to the class, when you teach vitals, you want to go around and you want to listen to each student and sign them off personally, but it is impossible to do 25 students in one class period. So this gave me the ability for the students to have that class period to work, to chart. If I had a student who didn't remember how to chart, even though I gave them examples, I would sit down with them and have that time, because I only have 3 or 4 students working on it, to actually do it. Plus, then I could personally sign off each of those 4 students. And what's great is a lot of these students, even though they're taking diagnostics, may end up taking our CNA class. And now they have been one-on-one signed off and are really ready and know they know how to do this. So that really was able to really perfect that skill for some students. And then on each of these, you'll notice I have not only what it is, but the product to be graded. So for me, that is a page that I gave them where they charted their 3 patients' vitals, resting and active. So they also had done both the resting vitals and they'd done active, which they thought was a lot of fun because they had to get up and do jumping jacks or run in place. And so it gave them that movement as well as hand-on skills. My second station was careers. Now, we had already had an assignment previously where each student was given one of the ophthalmology careers to look up. And because I knew I was going to do this, I made sure that each student who was going to be in the group each had a different career. So what ended up happening is, so then they had each already looked up one, and when they came together to do this, they pulled out that worksheet from that one career, and each student was able to offer the information and compare and contrast these different ophthalmology careers. And they were given very minimal guidelines as to how I wanted the poster to look, because I was afraid all the posters would look the same. And I didn't want them just to reproduce. I wanted them to be creative here. And you can see a few different examples. I had tons. No 2 looked alike. They were all very well done. Some, this is where I said a lot of them went back and redid some stuff. And you can see I gave you some that were a little, what's the word I want to use? Some are very organized and then some are a little thrown together. So, but it shows you the different things that they came up with. Some used charts. But they are comparing those different careers. I did also find that this station is where my directions were the least clear, and I got feedback from that, and immediately as they started stations, they were coming to me not understanding what to do. So that very first day, I had 2 diagnostic classes, so both had the same issue. So I sat down and I rewrote the directions and made them more clear, printed those off and offered those. So I was able to do that very quickly because those groups were slightly confused. So that also helped quite a bit. And then I was redirecting them to rubrics, really teaching these students, look, it tells you exactly what to do. Use your rubrics. We always tell them this, but a lot of students don't actually do their work based off the rubric, which is going to help them so much more in college. So this station work was really good for that. And of course, what was graded here was the poster, and I have the rubric I used for that is on the information I've given you guys. The next one was the most fun activity for me because I had not done this before. I know there are a lot of teachers who do some really awesome anatomy stuff out there. I know teachers that dissect an eyeball for this section. That is not me. So, but I came up with this Play-Doh idea, and I started collecting Play-Doh before I knew I was going to do stations. And I gave them this box of stuff and said, this is all the anatomy you need to do it, 3D model. And so they all came up with different ways. One of the things I did is I have like a little side room or closet area in my classroom. So each day as the group finished, I hid their projects back there so that the next groups coming in couldn't just make it look exactly the same. I was afraid if the group saw what another group's looked like, we'd just have all exactly the same thing. So I hid them each day, and you can see from the pictures, they all look different. And I had tons and tons of different stuff come out of this, but all were really, really well done. And if they got something wrong or I marked, I said, hey, you forgot to do, you know, an area or one area or this area is wrong or you mark this wrong, that's where on that 7th day they could go back and fix it, change it, make new adjustments, and then get a better grade on this. But they all really enjoyed this because it was very hands-on. And then I've got those visual acuity exams, and I've spoke to you about that. You can see my classroom there. I have a kindergarten, a tumbling E, and a Snellen chart. And so they're going to take 2-3 patients on each one of them and then record them properly. And we had, like I said, we'd already done it once. So they had done the gradual release version of this. Now they were on their own. If they had questions, ask me. And as I'm circulating the room during this time, because each of my groups are working on each station, I'm able to circulate and answer questions. I can see, are they doing it wrong? Like I would have come up to the student here and said, let's not use the ruler. Let's stand and tell them the number or just tell them the area. Or I can say, hey, you're not quite 20 feet away. Make sure you're measuring before you start, and those kind of things. Make those in the moment adjustments. And what I'm grading here is their charting at the end. Did they chart it correctly? Station 5 was a little different. I didn't take an individual grade for this one. They did turn in the worksheet, and it went as part of their professionalism grade. I give professionalism grades in class. And this one was kind of a chilled, laid back day. So for those who don't do as well with group work, they really liked having this. In my school, I'm able to allow them to put headphones in. They know that in my class on individual work days, they're allowed to have their headphones and listen to music. Unless I find them playing on their phone, then they have to cut it off. And I know every school has different rules on that. But for me, my students love to be able to put their headphones back in, sit back, and just do their book work. So this was a kind of a bookwork day. This is straight out of the DHO, one of the worksheets that comes with the workbook. And then I added to it by having them do a Jaeger exam as well. And so you can see there's some of that information, and the worksheet guides them on a couple of things to do. So they had a little bit of interaction with their group, but most of it was a very easy, laid back, do the bookwork day. And this really reaffirmed some of the vocabulary that I had already taught them. And then station 6 here was the brochure. And this is actually a snapshot of one of the brochures that my students came up with. This is one of their pages, and the rubric that I used. And I pre-picked 6 disorders. It was first come, first serve. So by the time the 6th group got there, they had 1 disorder left, but they didn't care. So they went through, and here was the rubric, all the information they had to have. Now my students have made brochures in intro as well. So they kind of had a brochure they'd done previously, and now they knew they had to step it up a notch. And I had a lot of groups redo or add some stuff or clean up and make neater their brochure on day 7 as well, because they got a 3 out of 4, and it was just a couple things they needed to change or make better, and then it bumped them up to a 4 out of 4. So, and again, I do standards-based grading. So it basically just means it took them from a B or C up to an A. And I gave them ability to do that. All right, so I did add a day 8 as well partway through. It wasn't originally planned. And I gave a quiz and included a review of their own and their peers' involvement. So they were self-grading for professionalism. And what I found was a couple of things. Almost all students learned at a 3 or 4 level of mastery. That's a lot higher than typical. And then those who didn't do well on the quiz were the same ones who didn't score well on professionalism. Those students also, they know they weren't doing their part in the groups, and they scored themselves low. So I met individually with a few of the students. It was about 1 to 2 for each of my diagnostics class, who I said, your group made this grade. However, I'm giving you less of a grade because of these reasons. And none of them argued it. So it gave me that ability to say, hey, you didn't pull your weight this day and this day. You know it, the group knows it, I know it. We're going to give you less of a grade for that day because of it. And I had none of the students argued with me on that. They knew it. And so it made it really easy to be able to, yes, I'm giving group grades, but if there's an obvious that student isn't pulling their weight, this gave me that backup I needed to be able to lessen their grade from their group's grade. All right, before I go on, I saw a hand raised. Was there any questions, David?
No, I haven't seen any questions coming through.
Okay, I keep seeing something about a hand raise. If you have a question, type it in. David will give it to me. I've told him I don't mind being interrupted, especially to clarify things. But I'm going to keep on going. All right, so what we found out was students really liked the rotations in my class. They liked, it's very laid back, which I have a fairly laid back classroom as is. They did not like this quiz I popped on them. And I will tell you, and you'll see there, it was a surprise. I needed a way to prove that some of the students weren't holding their end, and I kind of popped this on them. And so, yeah, that was not well received. I did not record the quiz grade. I only used it as a tool to back up professionalism grades. But they didn't know that when they were taking the quiz. That's my bad. They were mad at me, but we talked about it the next day and they forgave me. But what I do plan to do, I gave you guys that quiz also. They're broken up into each station, the questions are. That is going to be, as I do this next year, those are going to be my bell ringer activities or my do nows or the thing that they come in and do. So I know if they did on Monday station 1 and then Tuesday morning they're answering station 1's questions, did they actually participate? I don't just, and if you're looking at that document, I don't just ask, how do you do this? Or what answer did you get for this? It's what was the hardest part for you? Or, tell me in words how to set this exam up. It's things to know, did they really participate or not? And I can catch that day, get on them, and then they still have that 7th day to kind of get back in the groove. Or that day, maybe they'll be like, oof, I'm busted. And then they'll actually participate better with their group. I really didn't have a lot of problems with that, just a couple for each class, which is less than you might normally have. So I took it as a win, but I can do better. So that's why I'm gonna break that up. Positives for me are there. The biggest thing was I was able to rotate, answer those one-on-one questions, really give feedback individually that helped push those students who really needed it. And then of course I built more relationships that way. So, and I was also able to, so each day I had 4 brochures to grade, which they take a lot of time to grade, but I only had 4 of them. So I was able to get their grades done and back to them very quickly. And they were able to see that rotate and those grades come back quickly and know, hey, day 7, we're gonna have to make time for this if they wanna improve it. So I really liked that. It made grading a whole lot easier for me. Okay, so now what about moving this online? So can you do this? Absolutely you can. Of course, it's going to have modifications. Now, all of us across the state, I know, are being given virtual platforms or being told how to make this stuff or how we're going to do it individually in our county, and everything's different. My county's been one-to-one for 4 years and we use Google software, Google Classroom. So that is what I am used to for our county. I have used other stuff when I worked with colleges, and when I've taught before, I've used some Canvas settings and Blackboard and things like that. But they all work relatively the same with a few just different bells and whistles here and there. But you need to know your software and what's going to work for it. So what works for me or for the teacher next door may not work for you. And you also need to plan this based on your comfort level. Just because something sounds great or the teacher next door can do X, Y, and Z with this, if you're not comfortable, it's going to make it harder for you and then harder for your students. There's going to be more confusion. So make sure you're staying both within what your software can do as well as what you are comfortable doing. And you can always build your skills over time. You don't have to be a tech master the next time we go virtual. So my tips for moving stations specifically, groups. Groups online are more difficult if you're not used to it. Not all students can call each other. Not all are comfortable calling each other. They obviously, in a COVID situation, can't just go over to each other's house to work on that project. And in fact, most days that doesn't happen anymore. The students work together at school anytime they're doing project work. You need to know, does your software allow the students to interact through the software? And the reason I say that is that way it gives you monitoring of which students are participating and when. So some software has a chat within it that the teacher can view. Some has, you could just have them make a document and talk back and forth on the document. But there are different ways to do this. Find a way where you can be able to see how they are working together as a group to do this. Or what will happen is that one super member is just going to do it all and let the group take credit because they're going to find it too difficult to work together without actually seeing each other in class. So kind of think through that beforehand. If it's very confusing for you and you're not sure how to do groups and you haven't had time to practice with a smaller project, which is what I recommend, before getting into a big stations and having these groups do all these different things, try one little group project where the students can kind of play with how they would interact and you can kind of teach them. And once you guys are all comfortable with it, then move into something like this. But if you don't have those abilities, that software, or just that comfort level yet, and you're not going to do groups, then you can individualize all of the station work. They're losing that group aspect. So what you want to do, if you do make each of these 6 items or however many you have an individual assignment, is still have them integrate and interact with each other. And there's a few ways to do this. They can do required peer evaluations on the work prior to turning it in. You can start conversations, some topic related, some non-topic related. I would throw some weird stuff up there, like if you could travel anywhere, where would you travel and why? Or, and just to have the students interact in that classroom setting. You can do this in those of you who've taken online classes before, you know that there might be that question, everybody's got to answer it, and then you got to answer to 2 of your peers. You can set up something like that. Or they can showcase, have a small showcase where they come in with their brochure. They have 2 or 3 students that are in there as well as you. You can have a planned time. And then everybody gives feedback to that student, and which I teach mine a glow and a grow, 1 positive, 1 constructive criticism or negative to work on. And then they can use that, adjust their assignment before actually turning it into you for a grade. So there are different ways to have them interact while still doing individual work, and you definitely want to do that. It helps with culture, and it will help have a better product in your class, and those students actually learn because they know they're going to have to share it with each other. And then I gave you an example how you might make something individual. So for the eye anatomy, not all students are going to have Play-Doh at home or something, or craft materials. A lot of students barely have anything at home, but if they use a can for the pupil, and they take a blue shirt and put it around it for the iris, and then they keep going with just stuff they have around the room, take a picture, label it for you, and they're still doing eye anatomy. So it doesn't have to be craft specific material. So give them that ability to do that, take that picture and share it on the classroom, and then use it as a conversation. Tell everybody they got a comment on 2 of their peers' anatomies that they made, or models that they made. So it's a different way to do it, but it still gets it done. All right.
Kesha, I have one question here.
Yeah.
It says, is the entire class working the same station, or are all stations live for each day?
Good. So all stations are live for each day. So I had a counter, station 1's materials, station 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, with the directions printed out and everything they needed. And the students knew to come in once I taught them what to do on the first day. They knew to come in. If their group was working on station 1, they got their station 1 materials. The very next day they worked on station 2, and it continued to rotate that like that. That way, that's where I get that ability where not all 25 students are working on the same thing. So those areas that need more questions answered, I'm able to work more individually with those groups. So yeah, this was a rotating stations. So for deadlines for this, I highly recommend don't have a strict deadline for each item. Don't say station 1 is due Monday, station 2 is due Wednesday. Instead, give them that autonomy to do what they want to do first. Or an area that maybe, hey, today I'm going to be at Auntie's house and it's going to be easier for me to do this, or I can get some materials to do this. Also, as I know a lot of us learned, a lot of your students don't have at-home internet access. They're only accessing the internet when they go to grandma's house, or when mom takes them in somewhere like Starbucks that has internet. So let those deadlines be a little more fluid. Maybe depending on how you're doing this, hey, you have 1 station due each week, or 2 stations due a week, or so give them those type of options and let them choose what stations they want to work on. It also allows there to be more variation of those assignments so that you're not grading 20 of the same thing. You're not grading 20 brochures. 3 or 4 students turned in brochures, you're grading those. 3 or 4 students turned in anatomy, you're grading that. And that it just makes it a lot easier to grade when you're not doing 20 of the same thing that is very difficult to grade, and it lets you get that feedback back to the students. For content, offer variations of things. Have your slideshows, worksheets, videos, and let them refer them to that. If they have a station such as, and you have my material there, I gave them on one of them a YouTube video link and told them, it's like, I will sit down with you and work with you, but if you would rather, here's a YouTube video link to how to do vitals. And it's one I reviewed and knew that went the way we wanted it to and was done correctly. So offer those different things, plus all my slideshows from my lectures, any worksheets that might help them. I didn't require those worksheets, but they're there to help them remember how to do them. So I gave them lots of extras to help them do the content. And like I said, make some of these things, don't make watching the video mandatory. Don't make doing every worksheet mandatory, because it's going to be overwhelming for your students. You're not their only class, especially if we end up automatically going virtual or last minute going virtual again. I know some counties are starting out that way. Ours is not, but we're all preparing for maybe going virtual. So this is going to be very overwhelming. So only make the things you really need to grade for mastery your graded items. Let the other items be things that are there for them to work through on their own to help get to mastery. And then remember, these are not intended to cover the whole standard. I did do some lecture beforehand. In total, I spent 2.5 weeks on ophthalmology. And then biggest thing is, by doing these items, you don't have to have that test or that written paper to show mastery. These items in and of themselves show mastery of those content, those different contents and standards. So that's what I really, really liked about it.
Kesha, right. We have a few more questions. And also, are you okay with me pasting your email into the chat? People are requesting that.
Yes.
Okay, I will paste that into the chat. One question about back to stations. Are you concerned, Ashley Corbin is concerned about placing students in stations too closely together with this upcoming school year? And then there was a follow-up question also asking, how do you see these live stations working in a virtual setting?
Okay, so I am going to talk about lab and skills in particular in just a minute. And then, hi Ashley, we've met, I know you. There is, as far as spacing, I am lucky with a large enough classroom, I can space the groups out well enough, but I know that's not the case for most people. That is where, and the students will not be able to maintain 6-foot distance while working in a group necessarily. They are going to be required for our school. We can be closer than 6 feet, but they have to wear their masks. So in all honesty, I've not completely planned that out for social distancing within the classroom as much as I have for moving it virtual. For the actual social distancing, a lot of it can be done from that spacing. When they're doing the brochure, they're doing it on their Chromebooks. They can sit far enough apart and still talk. I have the ability, I can let some of my students sit in the hall or move over to kind of space even more. The harder ones will be the ones where they all need to work on a poster, but I will prompt them to, hey, decide what you're gonna do with your poster, then spread out and each of you do the part you're supposed to do, and then one at a time come put those on the poster. It's not, as hands-on effective as we would like, but it will maintain that social distancing. So, and then I'm gonna move into a little bit when it comes to that lab part here in a minute.
And one additional question, Kesha, they want to know, Cynthia Thompson asked, do students have to go in order from 1 to 2 to 3, etc. in the stations, or do they go where they want until completed?
Yeah. Not in class. Virtual, yes, I would let them do whichever stations their group wanted to do. If they were working in group, I foresee me probably doing it more individual or partners, just because it is harder to manage groups. that is probably how I will handle it. I will have them do probably partners for their stations. But I lost my train of thought. David, remind me of that question again.
Do they have to go in a particular order, or can they choose their own order?
Okay, so in class, each group started at a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and they rotated. So yes, they went in a particular order. If I did group 3 on my first day, I'd do station 4 on my next day. So yes, they did rotate in order. Otherwise, what would happen is you'd have 2 groups the last day who needed to do the same station. So, all right. So now let's talk about just virtual learning as a whole. And what about skills? And this is the big question. So what I did for skills, and I have actually done, and you can see my picture down there, this was students, and I actually had them do this before I was doing stations. I was actually out for a week teaching at another CTE event, and so I was out of my classroom for a week. But what I had the students do was actually do these skills, these positioning skills for radiology, and take pictures, and they had to put them on a PowerPoint, label them, and then I would look at their pictures to see how they had done. And that's what's in the image you're seeing there. Another thing we have done in the past is I will record myself doing the skill. So, and I showed one of my stuffed animals here to David earlier, but I'm gonna show him another one. So this might be my patient, and I may record myself doing this skill, fully talking to my monkey like he's my patient. Kids love this. I mean, they eat this up that I'm talking to my monkey. So monkey might be my patient, and I might start off, hi, my name's Kesha. I'm gonna be taking your x-ray today. I see here your name is Monkey Boogers, and can you tell me your date of birth? And so I just roll with it, and they love it. They love it. Now, if that is not you, there are plenty of YouTube videos, and even if I upload a video of myself, I upload some YouTube videos as well to show them those skills. But then they see, I want them, if they have that capability, record themselves doing that skill on their stuffed animal or a pillow or a grandma at the house or mom or sister or brother, and then upload that video. And so it's not the same. No, it's not the same as being in class and taking vitals on 4 and 5 different students, but it still gives them that practice, that interaction, and it makes them have to get past that shyness to put themselves on camera and then upload it to the classroom. And so you can see there, I also uploaded wrong ways. We were doing blood cell counting, which is very tedious for red blood cells. And there's a specific way that you have to do it, you know, so I'm sitting there and there was some confusion on what I wanted them to do on this worksheet. So I'm counting through it and dog jumps up. Well, I uploaded that and I was like, this is not the way to do this. And so they love that kind of stuff. It really helps keep the class integrated and makes it feel like a class culture, not just another blind something I'm doing online. So there are ways to do skills. Now, of course, we're going to have skills they can't do. They can't perform phlebotomy at home on their teddy bear, but that's okay too. So you can have them watch the skill, practice the portions, everything they can do. Have them use a pencil as their needle and explain to you that they're going to be bevel up and why, or they're going to be bevel down and why not. So all those different things that they can do without actually performing that part of the skill that they can't do. They can verbalize just like you would during an actual skill exam. They can verbalize all the portions. They can act it out and verbalize all those things they can't actually do. And then you can also have them do an introspective mastery, which is, yeah, they're not getting that hands-on on the skill as much, but they can talk about how they could make the directions better. If you give them directions from one of the sites and you say, how would you make these directions for this more clear for somebody doing it? Or what do you think would be the hardest part of doing this on a live patient, a real patient? Have them really think deeply about it. It's still a type of mastery, even if it's not a skills checkoff. And it really gets them engaged with that skill, even though they can't be doing it. So there are ways to approach these things virtually. It's just not what we're used to. All right. And David, do we have any more questions here? I'm running out of time, so I'm going to move forward and just answer questions at the end, I think.
No, no questions at this time.
Okay. So I'm going over here, so I'm going to try to kick this pretty quick off here. All right, so these are my do's and don'ts. I'm not going to read everything, but the biggest thing is I have had experience doing these and I've made the mistakes. And so I've given you what I've learned, some through the hard way and some through some other great virtual educators that I've worked with. You definitely want to provide live anything you do live, such as we're doing this class, you want to provide that recording to those who miss it, because a lot of your students cannot show up live and you need to plan for that. You're not just going to be able to hold live classes. They can't all show up, not just by choice or laziness, but because they were up watching their siblings all night while mom was at work or all day and they can't get on. So think of that. You want to give feedback. This virtual, you have so much more time to give individualized feedback. So definitely take that time to do that. Not saying we have a lot more time, but there is that ability to give one-on-one feedback that students can grow from. Require turn-ins, even if you have them working on like a large project, like I have in one of my advanced classes, I have a book report they do, but I have small bits they have to turn in. Definitely, you know, do those bite-sized bits and make sure they're working on it, or you will have students who will not do any of it until the night before it's due. So make sure you're having those small assignments as part of your large assignment, even if you're doing a larger assignment. And don't grade everything you give them. Again, it's very overwhelming. And don't grade easily copied items. Items that come straight from online, don't bother grading them. Put them up there, tell them they should do them, but don't bother grading them. Now, if your student doesn't master what you do grade, you can go back and say, okay, well, now I want you to complete that worksheet I gave you and watch that video before I'm going to let you resubmit it for a better grade. So those are things you can do with that. Because I know a lot of you are thinking, if I don't grade it, they're not going to do it. And you're right. But if they didn't need to do it to master the content, we shouldn't be grading every little item. So let them use it at their discretion. And don't feel like you have to every week, every couple of days. I know my county is pushing, oh, we've got this new software, you can use this, you can use that. Look, I don't have time to learn 50 different softwares, and neither do you. So use what you're comfortable with and what works in your class, and maybe start introducing 1 or 2 items here and there as you get comfortable with them. And if I know we all started using Kahoot at the same time because it was in all of our PDs. And so students really liked it at first, but then when it's in every single one of their classes, because all of us were taught it at the same time, they get tired of it. So don't feel like because they've got this super teacher using Flipgrid that you've got to use Flipgrid. They're getting it in another class. Keep rolling with what you're comfortable with. All right, so I'm going to plug this because it's huge. Visible learning with virtual learning. If you don't know what visible learning is, it is small things you can do that make large impacts. And one of them is about feedback. And remember, yes, we're not going to be teaching them the same type of things that we do in the classroom when we're virtual, but they're still learning needed skills. The last thing I wrote there, virtual is a great way to give specific feedback. Let the student use that feedback to try again and improve their knowledge and grade. If they can try again and then master the content, that's what we're aiming for, even if it took them 2 or 3 tries. And so redo assignments. If you get nothing else from this today, I hope you'll take this into consideration. It is easier to do when we're virtual. Give that actionable feedback, not just, hey, you did well, but hey, you did not cite this source, or you used Wikipedia and I told you not to, or hey, this looks really ugly, try reformatting it. But give them that actual feedback. Let them redo it and resubmit it. This technique is proven to be one of the best ways for students to grow and actually master content. And your students can see the difference immediately. They see version A, oh yeah, that really wasn't as good. And then version B after your feedback, and they feel that pride that a lot of them maybe haven't felt before, so that's why they don't bother putting effort into stuff. And then it's so much easier to do with this flexible schedule. So, all right, questions and answers, and I'm running low here, so. David?
No, nothing coming up yet. I am about to post, just so everyone knows, I'm about to post the code and the keyword into the chat, so they'll have that for their survey.
Okay. And again, if you have more questions, and I know I flew through some of this because I noticed I was running over, email me. I will answer emails. My county is going back to school this week, so I may be a little slow on some of it, but I will get back to you. So.
Can you hear us, Kesha? Looks like you may have, are you there, Kesha? It looked like you froze just for a second.
I'm here.
Okay, great. You're getting some awesome jobs and great session in the chat.
Yay, thank you. I was nervous, David can tell you.
You did wonderful.
I'm talking to my computer screen, so I don't know what's going on out there in the rest of the world.
It looks like we have some hands raised. For anyone who's raising their hand in the participant panel, if you have a question, if you would type that into the chat, then we can respond to that there. Unfortunately, you don't have access to turn your mic on.
I also, we will get kicked out of this forum because I have gone over, that's coming up quickly. So sometime in the next 8 minutes, we're gonna get automatically booted out of this. So if that happens, shoot me the emails and I will answer your questions. There any questions coming through, David?
No, nothing coming through. Still some, such a good job. Thank you, great information.
Thank you. I've got a lot to refine in this class, but this went really well, so I wanted to share it with you guys.
Just so people know, I'm putting the code and the keyword in again to the chat, so they'll have that.
I'm just happy my dog didn't lose her crap through the session today. I kicked everybody out of the house, though. There's nobody in there.
Yeah, I had no issues with the pets either, so that's nice.
Yeah. I gave her a treat, was like, here's your treat, go away. All right, you guys, I know there are some raised hands I keep seeing. I honestly don't know what that means from my end, but if that does mean you have questions, please email them to me, as I know we're about to lose this Zoom area to speak.
Right.
So.
And just so you guys know, the keyword is guidance. And the code, if you're not seeing it, is LBNT9. LBNT9. And the keyword is guidance. I'll post that again into the chat.
I see a lot of people are starting to leave and you guys are getting those surveys done. So I really appreciate your time. Appreciate you listening to me to talk for 45 minutes or longer. And if nothing else, I hope you got some useful information. So.
From what I'm seeing in the chat, I think they agree with you. I think they did get some useful information and they're happy they attended the session.
Oh, good. I was too nervous to attend any this morning, so I'll be attending some later.
Nice. Now you get to relax. Now you got yours over quick and
early. That Monday, great. I'm gonna request Mondays from here on out.
Oh yeah, get it done. I'm kind of that way too. I like to go early.
Yeah.
So we'll probably be getting kicked off about any time. Probably it's supposed to end in 10 minutes. So.
I told you, David, I was going to use my time.
Hey, you did. That's great. You used it too. It's a lot of information.
Yeah. All right. You think we're good to stop share there, David?
Probably so, yeah.
Oh, here we go. Thank you for all your help, Dave.
Certainly, certainly. Thank you. Have a great one.
You too.